Welcome back. President Biden is getting involved in negotiations between the UAW and Detroit's three automakers. The threat of a united auto worker strike is approaching when the union's contract expires in September.
Michigan native Gene Sperling, a senior advisor to the president, has been tapped to coordinate the government's efforts to facilitate, fingers crossed, some smooth contract talks.
So joining us today to break it all down is Paul Eisenstein, publisher and editor-in-chief of the DetroitBureau.com. Paul, first of all, thank you for being here on our show.
Pleasure to be with you.
I think it's really important to break down what's going on right now. Where are the negotiations at this moment?
Well, we're getting ready to see the UAW sit down with the big three. And I should make it clear, a lot of people think this is somehow an industry-wide negotiation. It's not. The union sits down individually with each automaker, and they have to work out separate contracts. Though traditionally, they come up with what you'd call a pattern. And very often what they'll do is they'll pick the company that they think is going to be the most friendly, giving them best contract. It used to be called a strike target. They dropped that term. This year they may bring it back.
When it's at this point right now, I mean, is this every time the negotiation or the contract ends, there's always some sticking points involved, or what's changed from last time to this time?
Oh, sure. They always want to move forward. And this time in particular, you have a number of things happening that could really make for a sticking point. Number one, you have big inflation, and they're talking about bringing back the cost of living allowance, something that we haven't seen in quite a few years. But the other thing that the automakers are doing is changing over to electric vehicles. Now, that may sound great, and the UAW is traditionally a Democratic-leaning organization, but they are very concerned about EVs for one simple reason. They need fewer people to build. We're already seeing that around the world. Other automakers have been trimming back employment. Ford has signaled it will. GM has basically said the same thing as Stellantis. And the union wants to find a way to protect as many jobs as possible.
Now, is it odd for the president to get involved, or is that kind of signifying that we could be facing some economic disasters, so to speak, if this does not work out?
The last thing this president wants is going into what's likely to be a tough 2024 election is to see a strike. We all know that in past years when we've had strikes in Detroit, it has had a significant impact on the national economy, and it could have a significant impact on a swing state, Michigan.
Yeah, so that would make it a very big concern.
Very, very big concern.
How likely do you think that's going to happen, a strike?
Do you have a coin?
It's really
it's
like
really
that.
50-50.
There are a lot of reasons why one could say, oh yeah, there's no way to avoid a strike, because there are a lot of things that could cost a lot of money. And the big problem for the companies, even more than the upfront cash, is a potential that they could have some severe limits put on them as they try to improve productivity. Remember, EVs now cost more than conventional vehicles. So if they're saddled with restrictions on how much they can improve productivity, they may not be able to accept that contract.
When we're talking cost, then, is that cost of living increase also what the automakers are trying to factor into? How much do they have?
Well, the automakers are definitely worried about the cost of everything going up right now. I mean, we've seen the cost of chips, the cost of the metals that go into the EV batteries, the cost of steel that goes in all the vehicles. They've had a lot of headwinds on the cost front, and now adding higher costs for workers and not getting getting any sort of reduction in costs, or as it were, improvements in productivity, may be something they can't swallow.
Were you here when Jennifer Granholm was in town by chance?
I've been here for 45 years.
Okay, so you were. She
Yes.
spoke on this subject too. She's someone that also is in a big position. You know, she's talking about President Biden and herself, trying to make sure a strike doesn't happen. But what really can they do in that position? Because isn't it happening right here in Detroit? What could they say that could help get this done?
Well, as I said before, the UAW is clearly a very Democratic-leaning organization. And Shawn Fain's in a peculiar spot. He ran as this activist, as a progressive, kicked out the incumbent in the management of the UAW. So he has pressure from one side, from the union members, the rank and file, to come up with some real tough new benefits. On the other hand, he doesn't want to see a Republican president get in because the UAW has screwed up the economy.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. Again, Paul Eisenstein, publisher and editor-in-chief of TheDetroitBureau.com. Thank you, Paul, for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.